Okay, guys, here we are on our fourth grade homepage. Welcome to class. We've gone over the Zoom meeting stuff and times and so forth, and we're going to jump right into our first real module. This one is about the element of art, and today we're going to talk about line. This week we're going to be talking about line. Next week we'll probably be talking about line as well. Um, you'll find the date here for the week that we're learning. What module we're in, I should say, what week we're in, what module. This is the lesson or module title. You'll have a video link here. This is where we will be watching today's lesson. There will be the link to the assignment for this week, and there will also be a make art video over here when we make art on our next meeting time. Okay, let's take a look at this week's module. So as we go into our module, we'll see this got 26 pages. We're not going to do the whole module on a single day. We're going to do the first 6-7 pages today. Then each week we'll do about that many, depending on how long it takes us to get through. We just don't want to rush through it. We want to have time to take a look at everything in these modules. There are 6 elements of art that we're going to get to learn about: line, shape, color, space, texture, and form. When we talk about those elements of art, these are the building blocks. These are the things that artists use to create art. If a carpenter wants to create stuff, they use like a hammer and saws and nails and such. Well, these are sort of the tools and materials that artists use, the elements of art. Line refers to a mark made by a pencil, a chalk brush, similar tool. We think of it as a point that travels through space. Shape is the outline of an object. We can think of it that way. Sometimes we'll talk about this other one over here called form. Form is a 3-dimensional shape. If a shape has height and width, that's 2 dimensions. But a 3-dimensional form has a 3rd dimension. It's got width and height, but it also has depth, that 3rd dimension. Color are the hues resulting from reflection of light from our wavelengths that we can see. We'll talk more about that when we get to color. Space is the area around, inside, or in between objects. It could be the space that a work of art occupies. And texture is how something feels, or how it appears it feels, how it would look like it feels if we touched it. As we start out on this art exploration, we're going to learn about each of these elements and how to identify them in artworks. But before we get to it, we're going to take a few minutes to sit back, relax, and enjoy a little official welcome video.
Since the beginning of time, all art has started with line. There are thick lines, thin lines, and loopy lines too. What kind of lines represent you? Artists use lines in all kinds of ways. They use them in things as different as spiral glass sculptures and curvy pots for holding bouquets. Some lines go way up high. They reach and try to touch the sky. Line can show feeling. Making marks can be healing. Give splattering, spontaneous lines a try. Let your lines go awry. A line can show pattern, texture, and more. Look carefully at all the different lines to explore. There are endless opportunities. Lines can even speak about your community. Vertical lines go up and down. Horizontal lines go from side to side. Don't forget about diagonal lines. They lean over and lead to leaning designs. Check out these bold, jagged scratches or these delicate, wavy frills. Each kind of line takes craftsmanship and skill. Straight, tidy, and parallel lines. Lines that cross and make grids that bind. Some lines have rhythm. They jiggle and prance. Zigzag lines help an artwork dance. Lines have a voice. Did you know they have style? They look a certain way and say things all the while, like the dashes and dots of Vincent van Gogh. There are things only they can say and show. Gesture and contour lines help create flow. Always have those kinds of lines ready to go. Lines, lines, lines galore. Go on and play around with them. What are you waiting for? Use lines to sketch a plan, then paint a masterpiece on top. A pencil or camera can make lines non-stop.
And line is that most basic of those elements of art. It's the one we start with. Whenever we start with a painting or drawing, the first thing we start doing is putting some kind of line down, just about. Almost always. In this module, we're not going to discuss everything, and I'm not going to expect you to have know every single thing on here, but I want you to be able to discuss the proper behavior. If we get to go to an art exhibit, or if you have the privilege of going to an art exhibit, how do you behave there? What's the appropriate way to respond to art? Think about what kind of messages an artist might be communicating. We want to think about the space and know about the environment that an artist creates artwork in, but also where they display that artwork. We're going to talk a little bit about art careers and that sort of thing. But you can look through here and identify the different types of lines important. We're going to talk about thick lines and thin lines and contour lines and gesture lines and that sort of thing. So when we talk about exploring venues are the places where art gets displayed. A venue can be an outdoors or indoor space. It's a place for an artist to display their work for others to see. And we can take a look at a few different types of venues. And here you can click on any of the words that are highlighted in red if you go through the modules, and they'll tell you it's a place where an art event is being held. In an art museum, of course, is a place where artists display their artworks for viewers in public or private setting. This is a place that displays the work of artists from around the world. To do this, the art museums need to own the rights to the works. This means that artists need to give permission to the art museum to display a specific number of their works. Most of the artworks displayed in an art museum are paintings, but three-dimensional artworks like sculptures can also be displayed. When we talk about that rights to the works, it's particularly important when we live in a digital world and so much art is being presented online. It's important that when we present online that it is either been copyright free, which means you have the rights to use it, or if somehow you have obtained the rights to use that through some type of there are lots of companies that provide digital images. I use lots of images in the art projects I develop and web sites I develop, and I need to have a bank of images that I can use that copyright has been secured for, or else I could be in violation and using someone's work and then come with stiff penalties and fines and that sort of thing. So let's get back to the line. Horizontal lines that run left to right, those type of things. Vertical lines that run up and down, if you want to think of them that way. And these lines can often cause our eye to move in those directions. If we see vertical lines, we want to kind of look left to right. If we see horizontal lines, we want to look left to right. If we see vertical lines, we often want to look up and down. When we look at those artsy events where artists share their work, there are certain rules and procedures that you need to follow. You don't want to touch the artwork. Don't get too close to the artwork. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what those specific behaviors should be. As an artist, you should always be considerate of the artwork of others. Always ask permission before touching another person's work. If it's on display in a gallery, you're not going to touch it. Under any circumstances would you touch it on display. If you're in their immediate space, the gallery, or the studio in which they work, you might have opportunity to touch the artwork. I'm going to still recommend you not touch it, even if you ask. Also follow rules when you visit a venue like a gallery, museum, art fair, or even an artist studio. These types of venues also often have art openings. An art opening is when you have an exhibition that is first on view for the public, and generally there's some type of main event that kind of goes along with it. Invite a lot of people out, maybe have food and that sort of thing. Same is true at the public unveiling. Whether it's at a private or a public unveiling, you want to remember to be respectful, and even as you talk about the artwork, our artwork we love some of it, may hate some of it, but we need to be respectful as we think about how we talk about that in a public setting. We don't want to offend others that are around us. When you go to the artist studio, again, you want to think about how you can respect that space while appreciating the fact that you've been invited into it. And you want to think about how you can ask questions that might, and elicit a response from the artist that might give you an insight into why they create, how they create art, and that sort of thing. And so we want to try to take a look a little bit at that space in which artists create. We're thinking about when we go see the artwork, how are we going to respond to it? How are we going to be appropriate? We want to even things like volume level. We don't want to be loud and boisterous. We want to keep our conversations private. So again, we don't want to offend the sensitivities of others around us, but it's also respectful so the others can hear themselves engaging in their conversations about the art. So when we think about the professional artist studio, we're going to take a look at a few different artist studio, and then this week your all's art assignment is going to be to design your very own studio. It's kind of a cool project. It's one of my favorites. And if you do so, if you make a really nice one, you can use it as your screen backdrop. I've got a lot of students who like to use those as their backdrops. I think you all can now put those on your Zoom sessions. If you don't print it out and actually put it behind you, that's kind of cool. Have you ever been to a professional artist studio? Before you quickly respond yes or no, just remember that an art studio isn't always fancy looking. It can even be a barn. Wait a minute. Did I read my description right? A barn? Absolutely, yes. I've got friends who work in barns. As a matter of fact, there's a really cool barn outside of Lexington where they cast some of the coolest bronze sculptures made in the country. The art studio of a professional artist might look quite different from what you've envisioned. In fact, Jackson Pollock was an artist who placed his art studio inside a barn. Let's take a closer look at his and some other studios. This is Jackson Pollock. He was an artist who set up his studio inside a barn and was recognized for the dripping paint technique. And you would see his paintings. He'd have all these different colors, generally lots of browns and grays and golds and really neat colors that would all kind of be splattered and layered over. And even though it looks random, there's almost an algorithm that could describe how really well designed his images were, even though they look spontaneous. Spontaneous meaning they were informal, artist's choice, natural, unstructured, just kind of happens, serendipitous. There's all kinds of words we can use to describe that. Let's look at a studio inside a museum. One of the most fun things I've ever done is go to the Chicago Art Institute and actually draw a work of art right standing right next to it. And I didn't get to have this type of experience, but this has got to be a wonderful experience. But very often artists will learn from other artists by recreating what they've done and learning how to create the brush strokes, the process that artist has used. Some artists even go outside to make their studios outside. I have an outside space, and you'll see on occasion we'll make art out there as well. Discussing copyright. We talked about this just a little bit. When an artist makes something, whether it's digital, when you create a work of art, that's yours. It becomes yours. You instantly own the copyright to that. You don't really have to apply for that. If you put your artwork out into public space, there's a good chance that someone's going to start, particularly again in the digital age, people are used to just copy, paste, save an image right to their computer. And just know that that's not legal. Unless you own the copyright to that image, you should not be taking that image, copying that image, reproducing that image, and certainly not sharing that image as your own in any way, shape, or form. And so understanding that that copyright is what protects the artist's individual ownership. And so if I do a painting and somebody says, oh, I want that from my wall, well, they've got to buy that from me. They can't just take a picture of it, print it out, and say, hey, print this on canvas for me at Walmart, and then I'm going to hang it on my wall. They have to pay me for the right to do that as the artist who created that work. All right. Artists in the community. Art studios can be found in almost every single community. You live in a community that is saturated with some fantastic artist studios. I believe even in the age of COVID, I believe there are times when you can get into the artist attic downtown Lexington. It's in the old Victorian Square. I don't know what they call it now. Upstairs, there are several artist studios. These are all working artists. They've been there for 15, 20 years. It's been a very long time that place has been going. Gallery Soleil down on Short Street. Fantastic working artist studios. But you've got lots. If you can get to Kip Tutaris, he's one of Lexington's, he's a good friend of mine, one of the best artists, sculptors. He does some wonderful stuff, and his studio is amazing. But you can get out in the community and see some of these working studios. Artists will invite you in to take a look at their space and look at the work in progress, and that is one of the neatest things you'll ever get to see, is to see sort of what that process is that artist goes through. You can see some people are very organized, and these are all very organized studios. On occasion, you'll see me making art in the studio downstairs, and ours is less than organized on occasion. My daughter and I make a lot of stuff, and sometimes we don't always pick up like we should. All right, guys, that's our lesson for today. We're going to talk just a little bit. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to take attendance, and we're going to talk about this lesson. And then we'll be making drawings of our own art studios very soon.